The smoke was 3 days old when Aaron Koss rode back into Ariath. He knew something was wrong before he crested the ridge. The cook fires should have been visible from 2 leagues out. His mother kept hers burning until the last light died. There was nothing, just a gray column rising and spreading flat in the wind the way old smoke does when there is no heat left to lift it. He did not gallop. He walked his horse down the slope at the same pace he always used coming home, because some part of him understood that the moment he arrived would be the moment it became real, and he was not ready for that yet. Ariath was 31 families. Stone and timber long houses arranged in a crescent around the well. His father's deed scroll, 7 generations old, hung above the hearth in the elder's house. The charter bore the imperial seal in red wax and gave the Koss bloodline sovereign right to the Ariath grazing lands in perpetuity. What remained was ash, one standing wall, and silence. He found the deed scroll in the rubble of the elder's house. The red wax seal was still intact. He put it inside his coat, against his chest, and stood in the ash for a long time without moving. The Warlord Coalition's marker had been driven into the ground of the settlement center, a black iron spike with Lord Cavendrell's house sigil stamped into the flat head. Beneath the sigil, in the Empire's administrative script, settlement voided, land reclassified, vagrant zone, trespass subject to imperial sanction. His home, 31 families. Reclassified. He pulled the spike out of the ground and set it on its side. Then he walked his horse back up the ridge, because the Coalition's outriders would be sweeping for witnesses within the day. The only man who knew what Ariath had looked like before was now the only man they needed to silence. He rode north into the Ashfold Reaches and did not stop. The Empire's city-state registry had no record of him. No settlement, no guild affiliation, no registered trade license. The destruction of Ariath had erased him from every administrative ledger that mattered. Lord Cavendrell's land office had already filed the reclassification. Lord Yin Hast had signed the garrison deployment order. Lord Thalmor had provided the imperial clerk contact who processed the vacancy paperwork before the bodies were cold. 3 warlords. One night, 31 families gone, so the grazing monopoly could be consolidated before the spring tax census. Aaron knew all of this. He had pieced it together from the burn pattern, from the direction the livestock had been driven, from the single survivor he found on his second day north, an old woman from the Keshet settlement 2 ridges over, who had watched the Coalition's column march through at dusk and seen the torches go up at midnight. She gave him water and a name, Cavendrell. The other 2 names came later. He had no weapon beyond a skinning knife and a short recurved bow he had carried since he was 12. He had the deed scroll and a leather roll of his father's hand-drawn steppe maps. 40 years of seasonal route knowledge, water table notations, permafrost depth markings, grazing density counts. He had his horse. He had the steppe. The Ashfold Reaches in winter are not a place. They are a condition. Wind that comes from nowhere and goes everywhere. Grass that in summer stands to a man's shoulder and in winter becomes a flat white nothing that looks passable from above and kills horses from exposure in a single night if you do not know where the thermal ridges run. The Coalition's garrison commanders knew the trade roads. They did not know the steppe. Aaron did. He moved. He ate what the land gave him. He slept in the thermal hollows his father had marked in red ink on the maps. On the 91st day, he was so hungry he boiled his spare boot leather for the calories. On the 140th day, a blizzard came down from the northern range, and he rode directly into it because he knew the drift pattern would push him south toward a sheltered canyon system the Coalition's outriders never used. He came out the other side 2 days later, frozen to the bone and completely invisible. The Coalition's outriders never found him. They filed a report on day 200 that the vagrant witness had likely died of exposure in the northern reaches. Lord Drell accepted the report and moved on to his next problem. Aaron kept moving. On day 365, something changed. He was sitting at the edge of a water table spring his father had marked, a place where geothermal pressure pushed warm water up through limestone in even the deepest winter, when the air around him went very still. Not the stillness of cold, a different kind, the kind that comes before something speaks. System, Astride Covenant. Grief token threshold reached. Day 365. Terrain souveraineté unlocked. The last bloodline heir of a destroyed settlement has survived one full seasonal cycle on the land. The steppe recognizes you. He sat with that for a long moment. Then he looked out across the reaches and understood that he could feel them, not metaphorically. Every living thing within 2 leagues registered in his awareness the way sound registers. Distinct, directional, real. The herd of Saiga antelope moving northeast of the spring. The coalition outrider patrol on the trade road, for men, horses tired, moving slowly. The permafrost line 300 meters east where the ground would swallow a horse to the knee if you crossed it at the wrong angle. He had always read the steppe well. His father had taught him since he could walk. Now he read it the way his father read people. Completely, without effort, as though the information had always been there waiting for him to be still enough to receive it. He stood, rolled his maps, and began to work. The coalition supply lines ran along 3 trade roads through the reaches. The garrisons at the eastern end depended on grain shipments from the city-states. The horses depended on grazing the spring pastures that had, until 7 months ago, been Ariath's ancestral land. The warlords had reclassified the land, but the land did not know that. The spring pastures were where they were. The water was where it was. The thermal ridges and the canyon systems and the permafrost zones ran where they always had. Aaron spent day 366 to day 400 doing nothing that looked like action. He redirected 3 Saiga herds onto the eastern trade road over a period of 2 weeks. Not by driving them, but by blocking their natural avoidance routes at precise points on precise evenings so that the road itself became the path of least resistance. The coalition garrison's horses spooked repeatedly in the night crossings. Supply carts were delayed. One overturned in the confusion, and the driver froze before the relief detail arrived. He found the eastern garrison's primary water source, a shallow ice-over pond the commander had noted in his supply manifest, which Aaron had taken from a dispatch courier he'd encountered alone on a sidetrack, and spent 4 days redirecting the surface melt channels using nothing but rocks and packed snow. The pond drained east. The garrison's horses began showing signs of dehydration within 3 weeks. He did not fire a single arrow. The coalition's commanders wrote increasingly frustrated reports to their lords. Livestock disruption, supply delays, unexplained water source failures, outriders returning with nothing, no enemy contact, no rebel formation, no visible cause. The steppe was simply not cooperating. On day 500, Lord Yin has sent an additional patrol of 12 men into the northern reaches to find whatever was causing the disruption. Aaron watched them pass from a thermal hollow 50 meters from the trade road, invisible in white-gray riding gear, and did not move. He let them spend 11 days finding nothing. He watched them file back out, colder and angrier and emptier than they had gone in. On day 730, the second threshold arrived. System, Astride Covenant, Grief Token Threshold reached. Day 730. Steppe seal unlocked. 2 full seasonal cycles. The steppe moves with you now. He was standing on a high ridge in early spring when it happened. He felt the weather system building from the north the way he had always felt it, in his joints, in the air pressure, in the behavior of the grass. But now there was something else, a directional sense, a knowledge of where it was going, and if he moved to the right place and did the right things with terrain and wind channels and snowpack disruption, where would go instead? He spent 3 days preparing. He broke snowpack on the north-facing slopes of the canyon system above the coalition's main western supply road. He positioned himself and let the steppe seal do what it was built to do. The blizzard that came down on day 733 was not unusual in size. What was unusual was that it ran directly along the western supply corridor, a route that by every historical weather pattern should have been sheltered by the canyon range, and buried 30 kilometers of road under 2 meters of packed snow in 18 hours. The coalition's western garrison was cut off for 6 weeks. Lord Thalmor sent a formal complaint to the Imperial Weather Registry. The registry noted, politely, that weather in the Ashfold reaches was outside their jurisdiction. By day 800, Drell had pulled two of his three eastern garrisons back to the city-state perimeter. The cost of maintaining them was exceeding the value of the grazing monopoly. By day 900, Yenhas had begun informal negotiations with two other regional lords about the possibility of subletting the reclassified land, which was to say, the possibility of admitting the reclassification had been a mistake without ever calling it that. By day 1000, Lord Thalmor was drinking heavily and signing nothing. Aaron watched all of this from a step. He ate well now, the land provided, and he had learned to ask it correctly. He was lean and weathered and very quiet. And when he rode across the reaches, the Saiga herds parted for him, and the Outriders' horses shied away from his trail without the Outriders knowing why. He was not angry. He had been angry for approximately the first 300 days. What he was now was patient, and patient was much more dangerous. He had been counting. On the morning of day 1095, he rode to the ash marker. The black iron spike was still on its side where he had put it. 3 years of weather had not moved it. He set it upright again, not to honor it, but because he wanted it visible, and sat on his horse in the center of what had been Ariath and waited. The Imperial summons had gone out 4 days earlier. He had not sent it himself. He had not needed to. System, Ashtride Covenant, Grief Token Threshold reached. Day 1095. Sovereign Ash unlocked. 3 full seasonal cycles. The last bloodline heir of a destroyed settlement, having survived alone on the land, has completed the covenant. All settlement deeds held in the Ashtride Covenant are hereby restored to the Imperial Ledger in their original form. The raid orders that caused their destruction are appended to each restored deed as permanent Imperial record. Classification: unranked / above Empire / the Ashtride. He felt the deed scroll inside his coat go warm for a moment, then settle. Somewhere in the Imperial capital, a registry clerk was staring at 31 settlement entries that had not existed 10 minutes ago, each one appended with a sealed document containing the full text of the raid orders. Lord Drell's command signature, Lord Yenhas' garrison deployment authorization, Lord Thalmor's clerk contact, and the payment record for the vacancy processing. Dates, names, amounts. The Imperial Land Commission had sent the summons. The 3 warlords arrived within 2 hours of each other, each with a reduced retinue. They had learned, apparently, that bringing large armed parties into the Ashfold Reaches was an exercise in supply chain misery. Lord Drell came first, his face arranged in the careful blankness of a man who does not yet know how bad it is. Lord Yenhas came second, and he had clearly received a message from his capital contact en route, because he looked like a man who had just seen the bottom of a very deep drop. Lord Thalmor came last, and said nothing when he arrived, which told Aaron everything about what Thalmor's morning had been. They looked at the man sitting on horseback in the center of the ash. The man in the weathered riding coat with the close-cropped dark hair and the eyes that were watching them the way the steppe watches everything, completely, without judgment, recording. "You are the vagrant," Drell said. "I am Aaron Koss," Aaron said, elder son of Ariath. The Imperial settlement restored to the ledger this morning under deed reference Koss Ariath. 7 generations, Imperial seal, red wax, still intact. He reached in his coat and held up the deed scroll. The red seal caught the morning light. Drell started to speak. Aaron spoke first, and his voice was not loud, but it carried the way sound carries on open steppe, clean and flat and impossibly far. "The Ashtride Covenant appended your raid orders to the restored deed at the moment of activation," he said. "The Imperial Land Commission received them 4 days ago. That is why you were summoned. I did not summon you. The record did." Yenhas had gone pale. "The document includes," Aaron continued, and his voice did not change in texture or tempo, "the command signature for the raid, the garrison deployment authorization, the contact name at the Imperial Clerk's office, and the payment amount for processing the vacancy paperwork. It is dated. It is sealed. It is now permanent Imperial record attached to a restored deed, which means it cannot be voided, amended, or reclassified without the personal authorization of the Emperor. Thalmor sat very still on his horse. I have one request, Aaron said. Not a demand. I'm not here to negotiate anything. The record has already settled the question of what you did. My request is simply this. He looked at the black iron spike standing upright in the ash. Get down from your horses. There was a long silence. Caven Drell dismounted first. He did it the way men do things when they have run every calculation and found no exit. Not in defeat exactly, but in the specific exhaustion of men who built their power on the assumption that the powerless stay powerless. He knelt in the ash of Ariath and said nothing. Yenhas followed. Then Thalmor, stiffly, as though his knees had forgotten how to bend to anything other than his own will. 3 warlords, 31 families worth of ash under their knees. Aaron looked at them for a moment. Then he looked out across the reaches, the spring grass coming in now, green-gray and wind-flattened, running all the way to the ridge where he had first seen the smoke 3 years ago. The land was always here, he said quietly, to no one in particular. You just forgot it remembered. He turned his horse and rode north, into the steppe, into the morning light, and did not look back. Behind him, the Imperial Land Commission's officers arrived to process the charter suspensions. The Ashfold reaches settled into the particular silence of a place that has just finished being patient, and the deed scroll against Aaron's chest, for the first time in 1,095 days, did not feel like a wound. It felt like a deed.